Welcome to your science news briefing for January 16th, 2026. We've got a packed one for you today, covering everything from a pretty serious medical emergency up in orbit, all the way to a discovery that could literally rewrite the rules of physics. So let's jump right in.
All right, so here's the plan. We're going to start with some big news from the International Space Station, then we'll dive into some pretty alarming trends here on our changing planet. After that, we've got major medical advances, and we'll finish things off with some seriously mind-bending physics.
Okay, let's kick things off about 400 kilometers straight up, on the International Space Station. We've got two really big updates on human spaceflight and manufacturing, and honestly, they could completely change how we explore space from here on out.
So first up, the SpaceX Crew 11 mission, they're back on Earth way ahead of schedule, and the reason is a big deal. NASA is calling it a serious medical concern for one of the astronauts on the station.
Now, this is a really big deal because it's the very first time an American-led mission has ever been cut short for a medical evacuation from the ISS. We don't know the specifics of the medical issue, they're keeping that private, but the fact that the crew got back so quickly and safely, well, it really shows just how solid our modern recovery plans have become.
So, while one crew was making that unexpected trip home, another huge development was announced that is, no joke, a total game changer for future missions. For the very first time, astronauts have successfully 3D printed metal parts right there on the station. This is a massive milestone for manufacturing in space.
So this whole project is a team-up between the European Space Agency and Airbus, and it's a huge leap forward. We're talking about a super high-powered laser that melts stainless steel wire at over 1200 degrees Celsius. Think about that. It's a world away from the old plastic printers they had, which could only make, little tools and things that couldn't take any real stress. This is about making strong, load-bearing parts right there in orbit.
And what this really is the first step towards true self-sufficiency in space. I mean, just imagine it. Astronauts on the moon or even Mars being able to print their own tools, their own replacement parts, any critical component they need, right when they need it. No more waiting months or even years for a resupply ship from Earth. That's the dream.
Okay, let's come back down to Earth for a bit. We've got two new studies that are really showing how climate change is fundamentally messing with our ecosystems. And we're talking about everything from huge landscapes down to the way tiny little insects behave.
All right, get this. New research, and they did this by combining data from ancient peat cores with modern satellite imagery, has uncovered something pretty startling. Wildfire activity up in the Alaskan Arctic, it's now higher than it has been at any point in the last 3,000 years.
And what's happening is this really dangerous feedback loop, a kind of vicious cycle. The warming temperatures are drawing out the tundra, right? That lets these woody shrubs grow like crazy, which is basically just more fuel for fires. So you get more fires, and they're hotter and more intense. Then, these super hot fires burn through the carbon-rich peat on the ground, which releases even more carbon into the atmosphere, which, you guessed it, just speeds up the warming.
And it's not just the land itself that's changing because of the warming and habitat loss. The animals are being forced to adapt too, and in ways that can actually have a direct impact on our health.
Here's a perfect and kind of scary example. A new study from Brazil's Atlantic forest found something really concerning. As we cut down the forests, the mosquitoes are losing their natural hosts, the wildlife they usually feed on. So what are they doing? They're turning to us. They're feeding on humans more and more. And this shift in their diet is dramatically raising the risk of us getting diseases like dengue and Zika.
All right, switching gears to medicine. Researchers are coming up with some really clever new ways to fight our most stubborn diseases. And at the same time, they're fine-tuning our understanding of some very common drugs.
Okay, this is absolutely fascinating. Scientists at Northwestern Medicine have basically figured out a wolf in sheep's clothing trick that pancreatic cancer uses. The cancer cells literally cover themselves in the sugar coating that acts like a disguise. It basically tells your immune system, hey, don't worry about me, I'm one of you. But now these researchers have developed a new antibody that blocks that disguise. It rips the mask off, letting our immune cells finally see the cancer for what it is, an attack.
Meanwhile, you know that long-running debate about statins? Well, a major new study is pretty much settling it. It's giving us definitive proof that these drugs are beneficial for almost all adults who have type 2 diabetes.
So for years, the big question for doctors was, should we give statins to diabetic patients who don't seem to have a high risk of heart problems? Well, this 10-year study finally gives us a clear answer, yes. It found that even in those so-called low-risk patients, putting them on statins cut their risk of dying from any cause by 20%.
And it slashed the risk of a major cardiovascular event like a heart attack or stroke by 22%. That's huge.
And finally, let's get into the really deep stuff, fundamental physics. This is where scientists are challenging some of the most basic ideas we have about how the universe actually works.
Okay, so there's a new experiment officially underway to do something that many people thought was basically impossible: find the graviton. You can think of the graviton as the final missing piece of the puzzle. It's the particle we need for a quantum theory of gravity to actually work.
So why is finding this one tiny particle such a massive deal? Well, we've detected gravitational waves before, right? Think of those as giant ripples in space-time. But detecting a single graviton, that would be like finding the individual drop of water that started the ripple. It would be the first real physical proof for a theory of quantum gravity, and it could finally unite Einstein's theory of relativity with quantum mechanics. That's the holy grail of physics.
And if that wasn't weird enough, in a related and totally mind-bending development, researchers have found a state of matter where our most basic idea of what an electron is just completely falls apart. In this quantum critical state, the electrons just stop acting like individual particles. But somehow, the material itself still has these incredibly powerful properties. It's a discovery that opens up whole new pathways for building better, more stable quantum computers.
So, let's do a quick recap. We had a medical first in orbit and a huge leap forward in space manufacturing. Down on Earth, we're seeing record-breaking Arctic fires and mosquitoes changing their behavior. And then we've got breakthroughs in cancer therapy and a hunt for the very secrets of the universe. Yeah, it's been a pretty busy day for science.
And that's your science news update for January 16th, 2026. Hey, if you want to stay on top of all the latest breakthroughs, do us a favor and like this explainer, and definitely subscribe to the channel.
Thanks for watching.